It is intimidating to have to pick up beer to take to a party because the craft beer industry has exploded here in the state of Michigan. It has actually become a multi-million-dollar industry and a huge boost to our economy. But just like so many other industries, they are also taking a hit during the pandemic. To talk to us a little bit more, Travis Fritts with us. He's a brewer and the president and co-founder of the Nation Brewing Company. Thank you so much for being with us. And I started out, I'm like, where's your beer?
Well, it's a little early for me, I have to be honest, but I'm certainly positive about people who might like to have a sip at 11:30 here in the morning.
Well, what's the saying? Is 5 o'clock somewhere in the world?
That is a saying, yeah, and it's true. But I'm also at work. There's a certain decorum.
But let's talk about this. How did you even get started in this world?
About 20 years ago, I attended university at the Technical University in Berlin, Germany, and was recruited into their brewing program at a college within the university called the VLB. So that's where I started brewing in Michigan around 2003 or so.
Wow, that is amazing to me. Like, what were you studying?
Food science. Essentially cheese and bread is what I was studying, and it wasn't that big of a leap to be here, honestly.
So with that, here you are 20 years later, the president and co-founder for the Old Nation Brewing Company. We have to ask, how are you and your business, how is it going in the middle of the pandemic?
I have to express my thanks and say that we're one of the lucky breweries who have relationships, particularly with chain retailers, with our brand M43 and attending brands B43 and Boss Tweed. So particularly larger retailers like Meijer, Kroger have stayed strong, as well as some larger independent stores throughout the pandemic. So although some of our production has shifted away from, for example, draft into cans, we've been able to stay relatively stable. And again, we're thankful to be one of those lucky few.
Yeah, because in fact, I mean, alcohol sales have been up during the pandemic, but what is that like to have to try to shift your production from, like you were saying, the draft over to the cans?
Well, again, we're thankful to have been doing this for a long time. So, it's the more experience you have at any job, the farther you can kind of see into the future. And so, for us, we made moves to shift a lot of our raw materials purchasing right away at the beginning of the pandemic, and that's paid off in terms of having that stuff available to us so we can produce more beer.
So Travis, and with that, can you talk about the supply chain? Have there been hiccups along the way? Because what does it take to make beer, and where do you get those items?
Yeah, we source, as do many, a lot of our hops, which is an important ingredient in beer, of course, from the Pacific Northwest. If you remember, the pandemic started there really in earnest in Seattle and that area early on. While there was some obviously concern for our partners out there and some concern for the supply chain, it never really materialized. Similarly with barley and a lot of the organic materials we use, aluminum has been touch and go. Again, for us, we have a good relationship with our supplier, but particularly 12-ounce cans, which we don't do much with, have been difficult for a lot of producers here in the state of Michigan to acquire.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about that for a while because when we could start taking cans back, even now you go to the grocery store and the line is out the door.
Yeah, my garage still is full of cans. Bit by
Right.
bit.
I will say I gave up and started donating them. There's someone in the neighborhood, she's going to nursing school and she's always looking for donations. I'm like, you can have them.
It's a great idea.
I'm not waiting in that line, but from a retail standpoint, that has been an issue.
Yeah, well, and it's intuitive, right? I mean, folks, as you say, alcohol sales have been up across the board throughout alcohol producing industry, so liquor, wine, beer. That means that people are still drinking, but instead of drinking at a bar from a washable glass, they are ostensibly buying cans and bottles. And that, of course, will create a demand on both ends, right? For supply and then for disposal later on. So it's been a trip, of course, as it has been for a lot of industries.
So can we kind of talk a little bit more about the actual making of the beer? How do you come up with some of these different types and different flavors of the beer? Because this has become a very, very competitive industry over the past 10, 15, 20 years, and even more so here in the state of Michigan.
It has, and the landscape has changed in my 20 years in the industry here in Michigan drastically, with regard to competition and all kinds of things. So I think, like in any trade job where you're producing a consumer good, it's important to know who you are and as a craftsperson and what you're capable of, and working within those constraints to make the best kind of product that you can. And having set rules for yourself in terms of what you will do and what you won't do, what you intend to do and what your goals are, is where any recipe or good product starts. I don't think just in beer, but certainly with brewing.
How do you come up with the different flavors? I see that you have a new one that's coffee infused. Well,
Yeah,
and, I mean, if you have a coffee infused beer, isn't that saying you can drink it before noon?
I think, yeah, let's say it is. Yeah, absolutely. You know, a lot of that's intuitive. So that's a brown ale, which uses malts that are roasted and bring naturally some flavors of coffee as well. So accentuating that with the coffee that complements that flavor in the beer is not necessarily a layup, but again, following those intuitive paths is important. You know, creating something out of whole cloth is amazing, and we all love when craftspeople do it. But you know, kind of saying, okay, this already tastes like this. What can we do to bring that out even more by adding another ingredient is a great way to create a product.
Travis Fritts with us here on the MegaCast. He's the brewer, president, and co-founder for the Nation Brewing Company. When you are actually trying to design some of these new flavors, do you have a team that comes together to say we maybe need more of this flavor, less of this flavor, but then what comes into once you decide on something, what's that marketing plan like?
Sure. Well, it varies, honestly. Capitalizing on opportunity is really important, particularly in the context of an industry where the big players are willing and able to spend millions of dollars in states like Michigan. And of course, a brewer like myself, although we are lucky to be successful, doesn't have anything like that kind of marketing money. So when we're developing a style of beer, it's important for us to understand it completely by tasting other examples or by intuiting what other examples might be. And then my brewing partner, Nate, he and I have worked together for 15 years. We'll get together, write the original recipe, brew a pilot batch, a sort of a test batch. And then we'll just give it to as many people as possible and listen to feedback, sort of educated and uneducated, and take that in and adjust as necessary if necessary.
So do you hate people like me when I go into some of the breweries? I'll be like, do you have a beer that tastes like Corona Light?
No, I don't hate anybody. I think that, I grew up in a town called Dimondale, which is a really small town. Most of the folks there drank and still drink stuff like that, right? Bud Light, Corona, whatever. And,
Pabst
they
Blue
know
Ribbon.
Pabst
Go
Blue
ahead, you
Ribbon,
can say it.
if you're lucky, right? The truth is they know what they like, and that's what they're drinking. And if they choose at some point to expand their palate and try something else, I think that's great. But, I know just as many people that won't drink anything but, really strong IPAs, and I don't see how that's that much different. So we do always keep a beer like that on tap for folks like you, and we're happy to serve you.
Where do you think the future of craft brewing is going, especially here in the state of Michigan? Because it seems to have exploded over the past, 10, 15 years here in the state? Because like you said, you can find so many of these different craft brews in our supermarkets now. What is the future? Has it reached a saturation point?
I think a little, but it's so there are two roads that craft beers always walk down, and I think that'll continue. I think that folks who know how to run a great pub in any size community there's always a place for that, and there's always a place for more of that. And competition in that case breeds excellence, I think. You have it in Rochester, of course, with Rochester Mills has been there forever, and other breweries of that nature. Those breweries who don't distribute, I think that's a great path for folks to walk down. They're looking to get into the industry. Distributing breweries, that's becoming a little bit more difficult. Obviously, the competition is much more intense, as you say, around the shelf at the grocery store and with distributors. Again, we've been lucky enough to have been in that kind of fight for a long time. So For us, none of it is confusing or difficult to navigate. But I think for folks coming into the industry, it's certainly, there's a pretty high barrier to entry, and I don't see that coming down anytime soon.
One of the issues during the pandemic for so many employers has been trying to get employees. What's that side of the house like for you and members of your team?
So on the brewing side, which is the bulk of our business, about 90% of our revenue, so traditionally, and more so this year, it isn't that difficult. We have generally tradesmen and women who are here for the long haul. They're learning their trade and they're getting some mastery here. So there tends to be great retention there. In the restaurant, our restaurant is like most restaurants, there is some turnover. And so replacing people hasn't necessarily been a problem for us by the way, we've been curbside since March of last year. Will remain so until it's safe to reopen. But our curbside business has been great. It's not necessarily a problem of not having people come in, having people available to come in and work the restaurant as new hires, but it's a problem of trust and making sure that those folks are as safe as we need to be in order to keep the folks in the restaurant healthy, and just as importantly, the men and women in the brewery who are making the beer for distribution healthy.
So are you guys coming up with some type of COVID-19 or pandemic beer we should be looking out for? Or
No.
Do you stay away from those words?
I do absolutely stay away from them. I'll be happy to forget. That's what I think.
Travis Fritts with us. Where can people find your beer?
Just about anywhere beer is sold. Certainly Meijer, Kroger, even Walmart. And your specialty stores, you'll be able to find a little bit more breadth of what it is that we do. In the Ann Arbor, Livingston area, Bush's is a great place to go. Zatuna's right there in Rochester Hills is one of our favorites, Holiday and Royal Oak. So just about anywhere beer is sold, you can find M43, B43, and Boss Tweed. Then, as I say, an expanded line at your smaller, more specialty shops.
Because you guys are here Michigan-based, where are you making the beer?
Williamston and Detroit. So downtown Detroit and Corktown, we have a facility that we use, and then our main facility here in Williamston near Lansing.
What's so great about that is you're supporting the local economy, but also local employees and local people as well in our local communities. So if you're out buying beer, go local.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, the flavor, the kind of path you can take your own palate on in an evening shouldn't be discounted and is interesting. And particularly if you hit those independent stores, there are going to be people, even if it's confusing to you, that can walk you through what might be a great introduction for your own palate. And it's an interesting kind of adventure to start on. I hope folks do it.
I always go in. I used to have that problem with wine. It was intimidating to have to, take a bottle of wine. Now it's just as intimidating to have to take a 6-pack of beer. So I always ask the people that work at the store, what should I buy? And
you're right. Well, you were talking about a bookstore. It's not that different, right? When you walked into a bookstore or a record store years ago and you talk to folks about what you like and get a new recommendation, treat it the same and it'll always pay off for you, I think.
So before we let you go, your top 2 favorites.
Oh boy. I love a beer called Jäfer Pilsner out of Germany. You can only get it in Bowling Green, Ohio here in the States. So that really is kind of silly. Aventinus is a great German, what they call a Dunkelweizenbock, a dark wheat beer. You can get it at just about any store, Aventinus. And it's a fantastic beer. I hope folks give it a shot.
Well, I'm on my way to Tiffin after the show, so I'll be passing through Bowling Green, BGSU,
Really?
Go Falcons.
There we go.
I'll stop and pick up a 6-pack.
Excellent. And please, if you're out and about, I'd encourage you yourself, of course, and everybody else to try any Old Nation beer, and frankly, any Michigan brewer that you can find on the shelf. It helps us all out, and we're out here working for you.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. You have a fascinating background, but also it's great to have people such as yourself here in the state of Michigan and supporting our economy as well, because we need every penny we can get during the pandemic.
That's absolutely right. It's a circle. We're so happy to be here and feel so lucky to have weathered the storm here this year.
Travis Fritts with us here on the MegaCast. He's the brewer, president, and co-founder for the Old Nation Brewing Company. Check out their beer, pick it up, M43. You can find it in some of our local shops, including Meijer.